All right. We are live. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here at 500 Unity Inclusion Summit. This is the Emerging Fund Managers to Watch panel for 2021. I am delighted to be here today with some exceptional fund managers. My name is Clayton Bryan. I am the MC for today's talk. I'm a partner at 500 Startups. And to kick things off, I would like to go around the room or the virtual room and have each member of this esteemed panel give an introduction and a 60-second overview of their thesis as well. So how about we start with Lolita?
Sure. Well, and I hope everyone can see me. I'm in the car, and Jess told me that she could only see my nose down, so I've adjusted the camera. I'm Lolita Taub, co-founder and general partner at the Community Fund, where we invest in community-driven companies, pre-seed and seed. We write 50K checks, and we have a phenomenal team of 11 investors. And what's really awesome is if we write a check, Flybridge, who is our sole LP for Fund 1, will also take a look at your company. So it's really, really cool. Our investors are operator investors. So we have founders, investors, operators, the whole gamut. And I myself actually during the day am head of sales for a Series A startup on top of being a VC. And some of us just got to hustle. So came from nothing, first generation Mexican American, and my more career professional experiences, 15 years in tech, corporate startup, VC, and now, as you see me, VC as well as operator. So that's me.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that. Let's go to Maria next.
Hi, my name is Maria Velissaris. I'm the founding partner of Steel Sky Ventures, and we are a women's health tech fund. We invest in companies that create better care, access, and outcomes in women's health care. And we have a $50 million fund. We write between $1 to $2 million checks in late seed and Series A companies. A little bit about my background: started as an entrepreneur in college. My company got acquired by U-Haul, then spent years as an operator, and am so excited to be working in a VC fund now where I'm able to help a lot of companies scale and grow.
Phenomenal. And how about Jessica? Go next.
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me here. I'm a huge fan of 500 startups in the community and proud to have some of them on my track record. I'm Jessica Peltz Zatulove, founding partner of Hannah Gray. We're a new early stage fund that is focusing on really customer-centric founders and how they're reimagining everyday experiences to improve work and life. So we really look to understand what are those societal shifts and changes in consumer behavior and worker behavior that are creating outsized areas of opportunity. We write checks between 400 and 750K. We're institutionally backed by some fund of funds, a foundation, a strategic, family offices, CEOs of large companies. You name it. We can talk about that sales cycle if that's helpful. A little bit about my background. Started my career here in New York City, spent over a decade working with Fortune 500 brands, managing their media strategy, then started working with startups and helping them get their first customers and really recognizing how to connect the worlds between big brands and emerging technology to help startups scale their business. So just excited to be here and share learnings.
Thank you. Next up, last but not least, Mac, can you talk to us a little bit about what you're working on?
Yeah, so my name is Conwell. Most people know me as Mac. If you follow me on Twitter, it's Mac the VC. I'm a software engineer by trade, two-time founder of One Exit, and I worked for the investment arm of the state of Maryland for 4 years, where I started the first and only state-backed pre-seed fund for women and minority-led startups in the country, called the Builder Fund here in the state of Maryland. And I am the founder managing partner of Rare Breed Ventures. We're in the process of raising a $10 million pre-seed to seed venture fund. Anybody interested in being an LP, go to rarebreed.vc and click the button to become an LP. Minimum check size is $20K. We're raising on the 506C designation, so I could publicly solicit. Just got to put it out there. So we invest in companies pre-seed to seed. So anything sub 10 million post-money valuations are sweet spot. We'll go higher for the right companies. We invest primarily outside the major tech hubs, outside of Silicon Valley, New York, Massachusetts. We will invest in those areas opportunistically, but the bulk of the deals will come from elsewhere. And we're industry agnostic. Don't do life sciences because I don't have a PhD. I don't know what to do with therapeutic. It's not my skill set, but we'll do just about anything else. But we care about two things. So if it's a software company, we'd like to see a clearly repeatable or unique customer acquisition strategy. Don't have to have a lot of customers, but need to know how you get your customers. So it sounds like me and Jessica align on that. And then I also like physical products, typically in consumer markets that have lacked innovation for 10 or more years. So think a company like Rebundle, a company out of St. Louis making plant-based biodegradable braiding hair.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for sharing your theses and your background. Very impressive and excited to jump into some of these topics today. For the audience members, what we're going to do, I have about 4 questions, plus or minus, and that are pre-written and that I've shared with the panel. So we're going to start with those. But, I want this to be an involved conversation with the folks that are in the audience. And so please feel free to drop questions in on the comments, and we will get to those once I wrap up with the questions that we've written beforehand. So let's kick things off. And so the first question I have is, how do you establish yourself as a fund manager? What do you do to start to build that brand awareness? In today's ecosystem, today's climate, there's a lot of things going on out there. There's a lot of really great ways for founders today to raise money. So what are you doing to make sure that your story is getting out there, your value proposition is resonating with your audience of founders? So please share some of the insights that in some of the things that you're working on. So let's go in reverse order this time. Let's start with Mac, and then we'll go back around.
Yeah, so for me, I've taken a very brand-centric approach to getting my name out there and actually raising our fund. So for those who have followed me on Twitter, I've used Twitter as a way to build my brand. And more than building the brand is really just sharing information with founders and other VCs and LPs, sharing information about the kind of companies we look to support, sharing information about venture capital as a whole and demystifying venture capital, giving advice to entrepreneurs. And as people get to see my viewpoint on venture, my viewpoint on startups, and the kind of things that I'm interested in, I've been able to not only build the brand around Rare Breed Ventures, but people have been able to see the momentum. They've been able to see me meet with companies. They've been able to see founders respond and share posts, even founders that we have invested in, founders that we passed on, still putting out positive information out there. And then also, using my Twitter to build community, something that Lolita is very passionate about, but the idea of being able to use that community to not only help me and bring that up and bring, Rare Breed to the masses, but also to help each other. So very often you'll see on my Twitter, I'll ask people for help, or I'll ask people to help an entrepreneur. And it may be a portfolio company or another company. And so being able to do that has allowed me to grow my presence, and quite frankly, has allowed me to raise my fund. I'm raising my fund because of Twitter, and also that 506c designation, being able to publicly solicit. Thank you, Jobs Act. This has been very helpful.
I can jump in and build on that a little bit too. So I've been investing since 2014. I spent 6 years at a corporate VC before I left last fall to fundraise for Hannah Gray. And a lot of it is it's putting in the work with the entrepreneurs and building your reputation as someone that is just no bullshit, speak really unfiltered, and just genuinely enjoying helping founders build their business. We talk a lot about skills and character traits. Skills of being a VC, you can learn those skills. But to us, the character traits of just genuinely enjoying helping founders, thinking holistically about your network and how you can connect people with intention to help those founders build a business. That, from our perspective, has helped just solidify us as helpful founders. That increases deal flow, increases co-investors that want to collaborate with us and syndicate deals with us. But definitely need to give the shout out to community too. So I also co-founded Women in VC, which today we've grown into the world's largest community for women investors. We're now over 3,000 women across more than 2,000 venture funds in 180 cities and 60 countries. So as we started that in 2015, we really wanted to create community to help just better connect, collaborate, and help women learn how to be fund managers and learn how to be investors when often they were, the only in their fund or within their region. And so that's also something that has helped assert me as an investor as being helpful, but also just sharing those resources and best practices and connections with women around the world, because we just believe it's really important to learn and elevate each other. So that's been a helpful source for co-investors, for collaborators, for deal flow, and genuine community building.
Yeah, and if you're not following Jessica also, please do that on Twitter. She's got some serious analysis on the market. It's so good.
Getting kicked out.
So look, we have Maria back. Maria, I don't know if you were able to catch the question, but if we're basically going around and just talking about how were you able to establish your brand in venture? What are some of the things that you're doing to build awareness and also momentum? Please feel free to share some of your insights.
Well, being one of the only women's health tech focused funds, there's only about 3 or 4 of us in the US, really helped me establish my brand. We were one of the first 3 to market. And so we are really known for only investing in women's healthcare. And I think that's what really set us apart. So it really helps when people are at pitch competitions and things and they see a women's health startup, they just send it straight to us because that's how we've defined our lane very narrowly. Also, I want to give a shout out to 500 Startups in Stanford, where Mac and I met at that program. That really helped me define my thesis, define the brand that I wanted for the company, how I wanted it to be. And we really established our own core values of the types of people that we hire, to the types of PR that we do, to the types of events that we support. We want to make sure that everyone who works at our company is mission aligned. We want to make sure all the companies that we work in are mission aligned. And so we are very, very intentional about how we run our business to make sure that it's values aligned, because not only do we believe in women's health being able to, push boundaries and make lives better for women, but we also believe that, we have a job to do as far as gender equity. And there's a lot of other political things that go along with being a women's healthcare investor. So that's really how we set ourselves. We're not only VCs, but we're also advocates as well.
I love that. And if I can just jump onto that too a little bit, because I think that you touched on something that is so important, which is just everybody always wants to know, what deals should we send you? And so the more that you can be clear around, we focus on this is our unique perspective on market X, Y, and Z, and this is how we help founders, that's really what helps you build your brand. I've worked really hard, just kind of talking in context of what we do, I've worked really hard to be I am known for helping startups get their first customers and learning how to commercialize your business. If you need help with technical and CTO, awesome. That's not me, but I got 7 other people you can talk to. So I think just being really thoughtful about what's your jam, what's your experience, what's your unique perspective that you can dig into, just not only helps you build your platform, but it helps people know when they should be a go-to for you, depending on what their needs are for their business, or to your point, what type of business it is.
Right. And also how active you want to be. We're very, very active with our company, regardless if we're on the board or not. We're attending your strategy meetings. We're helping you grow. Yeah. And that's another reason that, startups come to us, because we have relationships with all the corporate strategics in healthcare, with the payers in healthcare, with their first customers, hospital systems in healthcare. So I think being able to build an ecosystem around your brand and your fund is really beneficial to your portfolio companies.
Totally.
Yeah, and I'll double click on that, because I think that building your brand around your own unique insight and edge is super important, and getting there is a journey. So if you're asking yourself, well, what is mine? And I know all these things, and which one do I focus on? All I would say is just explore them, see what is actually organically yours, and then really own it. Whether it's tweeting about it, whether it's blogging about it, whatever it is, just talk about it, talk to founders, talk to experts, talk to everything within that area so that you do become an expert, because ultimately a brand can be just a personality where people are fans of you. But in VC, we have 3 jobs, in my opinion.
Yeah.
One is sourcing deals, another one is selecting, and the final one is stewardship. And in order for us to build our brands, we all have to hit up all these 3 elements. And we actually have 3 customers, in my opinion, as well. We have the startups, we have our co-investors, and we have our investors that are LPs. And so when you're thinking about it, it can get really granular. But as you're starting, what I would say is like start off with just what is that thing you're going to be known for? And that area should parallel with your thesis. And then go and explore that. That would be the first step. And these are all things that I'm sharing. They're things that I've seen work for my friends, the wonderful people that are on here. It builds community, it builds stickiness, and then you're able to have a more credible footing in the ecosystem. And that's my story too. So my story is of being an underestimated member of the community and building a community around that, investing in underestimated founders, and then saying, look, the power of community is so strong that I actually believe that investing in community-driven companies, like when Mac is talking about, hey, I want to know how you're going to make money, I'm saying community. That is the most powerful thing. You're not just throwing dollars at Google. So the other thing then that I'm going to layer in there is not just being known for something, but having a perspective in your space. So I'm saying community-driven companies are going to create unicorns, and so I'm going to invest in that. And now I'm very, very focused on investing in these companies. And then, you can dabble and evolve, but bring people along, build in public. I think Twitter, similar as Mac, I've built so much of this on Twitter because there are those of us who came from nothing, who didn't have the social capital, and we're just building up, and this is our way. And the old VC path and the old VC guard may say, oh, well, whatever. But this is super powerful, and honestly, I would much rather have LPs and investors and founders I'm funding, that I'm supporting. We're all building and lifting each other up and creating generational wealth together. Be part of a community that actually believes in the future instead of being so stuck in the past. So hopefully those things are helpful. And another thing I would say, as you're building your brand, really reflect on it and be okay with not knowing everything the whole time, but just start exploring. If something isn't feeling authentic, move towards what is, because when you're building brand, people can smell bullshit from far away. So don't do that. It's a disservice to you and to everybody else. I'll stop there. And actually, no, one more thing. Clayton, I also want to do a shout out, because I actually did 500 Startups VC Unlocked Field Camp, and it was so awesome. And so I love 500 Startups. The end.
Well, thank you very much for that response, Lolita. And you actually, I love the kind of analogy around the customers, right? The 3 different, pillars of customers there. And I very much agree on that point as well. And that's a good segue to the next question, which is, we all know the numbers. We all know how undercapitalized women and founders of color are. And one of the questions that I get a lot is from one of your customer kind of categories, co-investors, on, how do I build a diverse pipeline, right? I think we probably all get that question in some form. And so what are some of the things that you are doing with your firm? And what are some things that you can, share that might be good best practices with some allies that are out there that are trying to figure out what's the right solution here for their firms? So how about we start this one maybe with Jessica?
Yeah, it's a great question. Something that we think about a lot. So 65% of our track record are women or people of color. And we like to think that the majority of our pipeline for deal flow is coming from our repeat founders. So we're fortunate that we inherently have a diverse pipeline built in, but we obsessively track data. So we actually have a form on our website, hannahgray.com, where we ask, a couple questions about your business just to help us be thoughtful and really be able to dive in on that first conversation. But we ask the question if you're willing to share your gender and your identity, because at the end of every month, we look through our pipeline and say, are we seeing enough of this certain ethnicity? Are we seeing enough of this location? How can we work harder? What relationships do we need to build? So we know where our blind spots are. So we just really believe that when you have data, it creates accountability and it creates awareness. And so by us measuring our pipeline of founders every single month, it helps us say, I'm not seeing enough LGBTQ founders, and like I would really like to. So what relationships do I need to build, or how can we be more thoughtful about it? Kate and I have also started mentoring a handful of emerging managers that are women and people of color, because we know that they have really interesting perspectives and deal flow that we would love to collaborate with them on. So we've also just been really intentional about donating our time and our expertise for emerging managers that don't necessarily have the investing background that my partner Kate and I have, as a way to not only pay it forward to the ecosystem, but to foster a pipeline of just diverse founders that we're going to want to see for our business. So that's a few ways that we've been thinking about it. But I do want to just riff on something that Lolita said about brand. 1,000%. So important, particularly because we like to think about it as we want to build a firm that's really progressive and that the values are aligned of founders for the coming decade. And what are the needs and what are the values of founders for the coming decade? That dog is freaking adorable, by the way, Mac. Hi, puppy. But so it's something that, but it's something that we think about a lot, because we've lived through kind of that platform experience when VCs back in 2014, 15, 16 were starting to scale out platform. And so we've started to be really thoughtful about what are resources and connections that are going to be helpful for entrepreneurs in the coming decade. And part of that is our brand. Our name is Hannah Gray. It's named after our daughters, our oldest daughters. They're 3 years old and 6 months apart. But it's just kind of that point. We invest in all founders. We are not a gender-specific fund, but we recognize that, early stage VC is a very human business, and we want to be able to connect with founders on all aspects of their life, because we've had founders get married, have babies, get divorced, go through, have a parent pass away, and that's just all part of the journey. And so that's really part of the relationship we want to build, but also recognizing that we are here to build generational wealth, and we are also recognizing that we're role models as women fund managers, not just to our girls, but to people everywhere, that this is a new normal, that you can have a great career and balance a family, and that needs to be celebrated. So 1,000% agree that focusing and putting an emphasis on brand as a way to create just authentic connections to communicate your values to the market, to your co-investors, to your founders is super important.
And I'll jump in and say we don't track metrics. I feel like as a Black woman, it's like, I'm obviously not going to just fund white men. So it's interesting. People ask me, let me check.
All the time.
100% of our portfolio happens to be women or people of color. 30% of our portfolio is Black. And that's with no metrics, right? So it can be done. But I do believe that people that feel like they may skew one direction or another, may have to work harder than others who aren't open. So my networks are diverse by definition, because I'm a diverse person. I'm in diverse networks, so I don't have to work as hard at sourcing. And I think people see me as a woman, they see me in women's healthcare, they see me as a Black person, and they feel more comfortable approaching me as a VC. And so that's why I really love the fact that we have so many diverse faces on this call, because there's founders out there that are going to resonate with us before they resonate with those guys, those bros in Silicon Valley. And so I think that it's great that they have a selection of VCs to choose from. And we've had these really amazing founders seek us out because of our diversity. We're all women, female-led venture fund, and that's very, very different from what they see out there. And so I think just by virtue of us being diverse, we attract diverse talent.
100% agree.
There is so much value in being a person of color in the space, a woman. I think that founders do feel more comfortable when you do come from a similar background. But at the same time, so at our fund, as I mentioned, it's 13 of us, and we all come from different backgrounds. And although we do see a lot of underestimated founders in their deal flow, I want to make sure we're tracking it. I want to make sure it's something that each member of the team values as something that's important and relevant. Because if we're leaving money on the table, if we don't keep an eye on this, if we don't make it a standard practice, and Maria, 100% right, it just flows to us. but I'm really interested also in how do we make sure that other people feel that they also have a diverse pipeline, because we want our founders in our communities to be funded. Yep. And so for me, it's really big on sharing deal flow. It's around promoting hiring and wiring. Like, it really comes down to those two things. Like, put us in roles, give us money to write checks, and then make sure that we're also putting money into the founders, right? And that's just going to attract it, because it's going to be talking the talk and walking the walk. It's what you got to do. Remember, authenticity is so important, because VC is all about like relationships and people. The last thing I'll say is, on our side, one thing, not on the community fund side, but something that my husband and I built, is the startup investor matching tool. And so how do we increase everybody's pipeline of underestimated founders? We actually built a platform where we connect underestimated founders with investors. And the way it works is that we have investors who have proactively submitted their thesis information, founders who are submitting their companies. And what we do with our program is match them based on thesis alignment and create introductions. And this is all free. And in less than a year, we've seen 24 checks written with a value of over $3.8 million. And we're really happy. Like, we want more people to see that there's money to be made in us. We're not a charity case. There's shitloads of money to be made. And we all on this call, we get it. So happy to be in this room.
And so I completely agree with everything. And, like Maria, though, we don't track the metrics. Like, we give updates on our metrics, but we're not tracking where, deals are coming, just because, having been in this realm and investing for a while, like, the deal flow comes, right? The diverse deal flow comes, being a member of diverse networks, they come our way. We actually notice we don't have enough white men in our fund, so that is something we might have to track at some point. That happens, awesome. Right? But I will say, for other emerging managers and folks looking to break in, especially if you're investing in underrepresented founders, like, there are still biases that exist. Don't get fooled by what's happened over the last year, right? Like, there's still biases that exist. And so if you're going to be investing in those types of entrepreneurs and have those types of companies in your portfolio, understand that the key metric's always going to be growth, right? Whether it's growth in customers or growth in revenue. And it's up to you to build relationships with downstream capital that is interested in investing in those areas, whether it's in those types of founders or in the industries that they work in. So, at Rare Breed, we spend a lot of time building relationships with co-investors and people who can invest downstream, because it's not enough, because everybody here, right here, we all do early stage. Right? There's not a single person here who necessarily writes a Series C or Series D check. Like, we get access to those deals, right? But, like, I don't have a $20 million check I can write for a Series D company. But, we need to make sure that when our companies are ready for those types of checks, that there are investors ready to write those checks for them. It's not just enough that we're writing those checks. And over time, some of the folks on this screen right now will be doing that. I'm very confident that Maria will be a growth stage investor one day. That's actually what she's more suited for. Yes, she's raising a $50 million fund. She should have a $500 million fund, right? Like, that's like,
I will soon enough.
I wholeheartedly believe that, and she'll be there, right? But in the meantime, we need to make sure that those other investors who do have that downstream capital, that we have those relationships, so that they don't see our companies with their biases. They see the companies from our lens of, like, oh, here's the business, here's the background, here's the breakdown, here's how they're making money, this is the trajectory they're on, this is the comps and why you should be investing this type of money. And that becomes really important, because this ecosystem isn't just us. It's when Lolita mentioned that, you have those three customers are the ecosystem of venture, right? And so the ecosystem all works together. Right. So it's all of us VCs at the different stages. It's our LPs and our later stage investors, and it's the entrepreneurs. We all need to work together, which is the beauty for all of our funds. We all have LPs that when our companies are ready to raise more capital, we can go back to them and like, hey, I have a company that's raising more capital. Does anybody else want to get in on that? And that is the value of having a diverse group of LPs as well. So I'll leave it there.
And I would just, when I say that we're data driven and we track everything, I think I am just like Airtable's poster child. I feel like Airtable just runs my life in so many different ways. But But I agree with you 1,000% in terms of the importance of downstream capital. So that's one of the reasons why women VC has become so powerful, is because it's less about the fact that it's women in VC and more about the fact that it is now self-reported data on 2,000 venture funds globally. So when we're helping our founders find follow-on capital or find co-investors, I can very quickly look through that and say, I'm looking for Series B fintech founders based in the US that lead rounds, and then share that with our founders. And then it's not only helping them have a gender balanced cap table, which is super important, not just for more diverse perspectives, but also just to have diverse ownership of the business for wealth creation. Like, let's just call a spade a spade. But it's taking a very hyper targeted way of curating the venture community for the entrepreneur. So then it's less about like, these are my buddies on Sand Hill Road or wherever that I know that like to follow my deals. And it's more about, okay, this is a government tech business that is super nuanced, but I know exactly who the 7 funds are in Europe that you should be talking to and being able to connect with intention. And I'll also just say that getting women and people of color funded is 1,000% as much as changing the face of the people controlling the capital as it is about the deal flow pipeline. And there has to be a greater emphasis on helping women and people of color raise bigger funds faster, because until we do that, that is a more scalable approach to helping diverse founders get funded. And so, of course, there's a ton of initiatives and pledges and gender lens funds and yada, 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 but the numbers are just not changing. Like they're just not. And this is like the definition of insanity. So you have to go farther upstream. And the good news is there's an incredible swath of new emerging managers that are women and are people of color, and focusing and giving them the same support and attention and helping them expand their capital network is just going to help the entire ecosystem. We did some research last fall, specifically on women-led funds. Only 5.6% of all VC firms in the US are women-led, meaning that a woman owns the firm, not just a woman partner that is like part of an existing firm. That is important, but there's a lot of nuances of why we need more women setting up their own shops. Like that it's what helps you own the management company. It's what helps you have the autonomy to do your own deals. It helps you have the equal carry, a whole slew of reasons. But the great and shining stat from there is of those 5.6 women-led firms, 38% of them are owned by women of color. And so that's why it creates a huge opportunity, because until we help these women raise bigger funds, that's just going to trickle down to the founders and making sure that the products and the services and the opportunities and how they see the world are able to deploy capital that way. So we also just really believe we need to expand the conversation about not just making sure women and people of color founders are capitalized, which of course is important, but expanding the conversation to also be including that on the fund manager side.
I want to double down on that, because I have been wanting to create the GP LP matching tool for the longest time. So we'll make it happen. Because I believe 100% what Jess is saying, that we need more women. And by the way, women in VC is super powerful, and it is so true to know who you can lean on. And as you're looking to support your founders, having those relationships with other funds is so important, which is why I really loved setting up the community fund with Flybridge as our single LP, because again, there's this like directional, like they can write bigger checks. And in fact, we've been around for 6 months now, and we are a few of our companies are now also getting checks from Flybridge, and that is something that's super important on the founder side. On the bringing in more investors, because I think this is such a key topic across the board, whether it's also early stage emerging fund managers or funds that are bigger. I think we need help along the entire cycle. And one thing that we're doing at the community fund, the way I think of it, our number one goal is outsized returns, but there's no reason why we can't do it in a team. And the way that we've recruited people, and we will be recruiting another group of investment partners for year 2, is to take community thought leaders and people who are the best investors, bring them in and create this new wave of a new narrative of what VCs look like and who we invest in.
Yeah, this is a really phenomenal conversation, and I think the piece that Mac brought up about downstream capital, and that kind of harkens back to Lolita, what you're saying about the 3 customer groups. And I think it's very important to understand and be able to build relationships with different investors across the capital stack and be able to then help your founders navigate those waters. That's how we help get our founders to, the promised land that is going IPO, right? Is like understanding like who to connect them with and how to build those relationships. And sometimes you're building relationships, 12, 24 months in advance to that financing, because it just takes a while for that relationship to that bond to set in. So this is also a really great segue to my second to last question. And just, I want to give a reminder to the audience, please get those questions into the comments section, because I'll circle back after we wrap up with my earlier questions. But this one is really around taking the perspective of what advice would you give to the emerging managers that are in the audience, the managers that are maybe 3-5 steps back from where you currently are at, right? Thinking about where you are at today, maybe 12 months ago, right? Giving them advice. So how do you start building relationships with LPs, institutional as well as individual? What are some key best practices there? And I think also something that kind of as a second question is, how are you thinking about your fund too, right? Because I know that some LPs, they think about it as a multi-fund commitment. So how are you thinking about that? What's your strategy there? So maybe let's go with Mac. Let's start with you and then we'll go.
Yeah, so the first thing I would tell you to do is sign up for VC Unlocked, 500 Startups VC training program. That was really helpful. It was helpful for two reasons. One, you get a lot of in-class traditional training just around venture capital and how venture capital works. But then you also get the ecosystem and the network of your class. So me and Maria went through the Stanford class of 2019. So we did August 2019. To this day, our classmates still interact on a WhatsApp group. Like there's messages every day. Like since August of 2019, we are still connected. Right. And I will say that, some of my classmates from that class are LPs in my fund.
Yeah.
Right? And they account for a decent portion of it. Right. And so that program has been amazing. The other thing I would tell you is start growing your network with other VCs. Right. Because here's the thing that we don't talk about. There's a lot of GPs out there that are LPs funds. Right? Because we invest in startups and we understand investing. And so when we see other GPs or emerging managers that we think have a really smart approach, depending on the way their LPAs are set up, their limited partner agreements, as long as it accounts for it, a lot of GPs do make direct investments as LPs themselves. And so for me, when I got started, I used Twitter to start building my brand and find VCs to have meetings with. And some portion of those VCs started committing to my fund. And that's really how I soft circle my first 1.5 million to get going. Now, I'm only trying to raise 10, right? So I'm in the process, but getting those meetings really helped get things going. And they started introducing me to other LPs. And it was just a thing of, I would just have, if I saw that there was a VC following me on Twitter, I just sent them a DM for a meeting. And here's the thing, if they see that you're an investor or you have that in your bio, 80% of the time we'll take the meeting, because this whole industry is built off of deal flow and networks, right? And community. And so we're all building our community, we're all building our network. So start building that network now as you're thinking about it, because one, you may find some people who are being interested in what you're thinking about, but then you're also going to find advisors. You're going to find people who are going to push back against your thesis and what you're thinking about and really help you hone in and get better. And as you do it, you also start to build your pitch along the way, right? So then by the time you're ready to be like, hey, I'm in the market, I'm ready to go fundraise, you've already built up those relationships. People have seen you grow. People have seen you go through this process. Just like a startup, talking to investors who, you're going to get to know those investors over time. That first meeting is almost it's never a check meeting. They build that relationship. It's the exact same thing.
Yeah, 1,000%. It's the exact same thing. You know what they say, ask for a VC for advice, you'll get money. Ask for money, you'll get advice. It's totally the same thing. It's totally the same thing with fundraising. So we also, of course, have everything obsessively tagged in Airtable, which has helped us take a very data-driven sales type approach to our fundraising. So, we have people tagged check in for first close, check in for second close, check in for final close, build a relationship for fund 2, smaller check, save for the end. We have room because we're subject to 99 LPs. So I would say number one is really treat it like a sales process. 1,000% be leaning on your other GP colleagues, because those are also people that can be references for you, that can back channel for you. So I also want to give a shout out to Operator, which is a little kind of similar to VC Unlocked. We took that last summer. It was phenomenal. There's 18 of us in the cohort, and same. It's just having those people to lean on and to be referrals for each other is just so huge. And building relationships with institutional LPs over a long time. We knew that we would have very few institutional LPs in our Fund 1. So anytime we would talk to them, we just used it as a listening tour. And I feel like just being able to have that authentic conversation for them to get to know us as people and how we think, where it's like, let's be honest, you're not writing me a check and that's totally fine. Maybe you'll write me a check in 4 years on Fund 2. I don't know. So we're just going to this is us. This is how we're thinking. What do you think? And I think the more that we were able to just lean into who we were as people and how we think about the market, it just really helped us connect authentically with institutions who ultimately, a couple of them did end up converting on this fund, which is awesome. But I would say that it's treating it like a sales process. And it's leaning into who you are as a person, what your unique perspective is on the world that you want to invest in, and what your unique ability to help founders are, how you do value creation, and just being yourself. I feel like once I allowed myself to do that, I just feel like we hit momentum in a stride that we didn't have before, when I felt like I was pitching and you have to okay, so this is how it's going to go, and just be yourself, because it is founders and they're investing in you, but use a very data-driven approach, because we now have a database of over 800 LPs that we can cut no matter what stage we are in our cycle of fundraising. And also just get better at qualifying them up front. Throughout our process, I used to be very oh, can I ask these questions? I'm fuck it, I'm asking, sorry. Yeah. Now I'm just we're asking these questions have you made an investment over Zoom? Would you invest over Zoom? No judgments if you don't, but let's just keep it real. If you're not writing checks over Zoom, no problem. But I'm going to use this time for feedback. Mm-hmm. So just being very direct about, are you adding new managers this year? If you're not, when are you going to add new managers? What does that process look like? So I feel like we've just gotten a lot braver around just keeping it real of you got things to do. I have things to do. If we're fit, amazing. If not, I would love to pick your brain on how I can be better, because we are competitive students and we want to win. And same with anytime somebody passed on us. It was just thank you so much for your time. As somebody that spent time with our materials, what'd you think? What resonated? What didn't resonate? How can we improve? And that just builds trust. So again, we become more memorable as we go to raise future funds for Fund 2, 3, and 4.
And I think what Jessica said about qualifying is really important.
Yeah,
I understand about building relationships, but no consultants are going to give you money. Don't waste your time. And
totally.
It's so much time, and it also wears on your mental health. You're going to get a lot of rejection. So why invite more? Really be intentional about who you're going to. Like Jessica said, you can go in PitchBook and look to see what funds under 50 million they gave to, how much they gave, how much they've deployed, how much dry powder they have. If you do your research up front, you can save a lot of time. I think I kind of was playing ping pong a lot. People were oh, let me introduce you to this person, who could introduce this person. And I wasted so much time going back and forth. And it really all the rejection starts to weigh on you. But now I feel like we hit our stride because we understand our exact target. And if I have a meeting in the first 5 minutes, I know if they're going to invest or not. I know how they enter the call, how the Zoom, how this is going to go. I usually can tell in that first meeting if they're going to invest in me. And if they're not, I don't waste my time anymore, because there's a lot of money out there and there's a lot of people to meet. So I'm not chasing people who say no 5 times. That's just not me. It's your life. You're losing out on money. I'm going to go find people that want to make money with me. And so there's a lot of people out there that want to do it.
Totally.
It's $20 million. So you get more, momentum. And you're gonna get there. So don't give up and don't take it personally. I took it really personally, like, oh, they don't like personality, it's me. But it's like, no, they don't understand my fun. A lot of people don't understand. People didn't understand what Steve Jobs was doing. They didn't know, So a lot of people can't see forward innovation. They can't see new markets. They can't see new ideas. But that's where we live, and we have to be comfortable with where we live. And it's going to resonate with some. It's not going to resonate with others.
Maria, could not have said it better myself. And I think that was also something that we got better on throughout the process. Is just say next. It's like a deli counter. Okay, cut bait. If it, there's just no need to chase and follow up. It's not a good use of your time. Same way, again, like Max said, think about it as a founder. If you connect with that founder, they will find you. They will follow up. They will follow up with you. And it's the same thing with LPs. And so if you're sensing that the LP isn't leaning in, 1,000%, I think you need to follow up. We were militant about, after every single conversation we have with an LP, following up, closing the loop. You'd be shocked how many people just don't follow up. Always close the loop, follow up. But after that, if they want to talk to you, they'll find you. And if not, cut bait, throw them on your quarterly update list. They'll reach out. But don't spend too much time chasing kind of the usual suspects, because guess what? They're adding maybe 1 to 2 new managers over the next 2 years, and it's probably going to be a spit out that they've known and they've co-invested with. Yeah. So like Maria said, there's so much capital and from so many unexpected sources that it's just being scrappy and hustling and peeling the layers back and talking to a lot of different people.
One thing that I'd like to oh, go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to say, just a quick follow-up. Someone was asking, what do you mean by consultants? Are they fresh LPs? So if you can share what, and I apologize if you already covered this, my internet was having some issues, but would someone jump in and kind of follow up with the response to what do you mean by these consultants?
Yeah, so consultants are people that endowments and foundations and big organizations like that use to filter funds. So if you meet a comment, they say, we really like you, talk to our consultant, and they'll see if you're going to be a fit. The consultant's job is to de-risk the investments for these institutions. And so by de-risking, a lot of times it means not taking a chance on a first-time funder, a female funder, a female, fund manager. And so we just realized we weren't getting traction there. So we just kind of cut bait. But I think going forward we met them all, and that's great. Maybe going forward for funds 3 and 4. But for your first fund, I would say just, go to the family offices, go to those high net worth individuals, like Max said, GPs. Other GPs, I was so surprised I would meet with a GP. They're like, wow, I don't understand what you're investing in. I don't have exposure or deal flow, but I'm going to give you the money so you can make the investment. So in what you might find, and I think Lolita said this too, and Jessica, is once you start co-investing with people, sometimes they'll say, I trust you enough to just write you a check to make these investments. I don't need to keep co-investing. And that's what's happened to us a lot. Now that we've invested in 10 deals out of our fund, I think people understand where we are. They see where our story is going, and they want to be a part of it, and they don't feel the need to have to do the co-investing. So those relationships are really worth building. And then also you can ask some of your institutional investors to fund multiple funds. So once some institutions sign on for fund 1, and they also sign on for fund 2 and 3 as well.
Yeah. And I would just say, if you are a first-time manager, depending what size fund you raise, just be mindful that a lot of institutions, especially the endowments and the foundations, they just aren't investing in funds under $100 million. $100 million is small for them. They want a $200 million fund. And that's also because they want to write a minimum size check, and they can only have a maximum amount of ownership. So it's also just understanding that if you want to build a relationship for feedback, cool, but just manage your expectations and your time, who's going to be that fit for you and for your fund size. Because it just mechanically might not work for them. Mm-hmm. So it's just important to be mindful of that too. It's kind of one of those 5 questions just qualify off the bat of, can this even conceptually be a fit to help you prioritize time and bandwidth?
I think that I just like to more or less recap and maybe add a little bit. I think that if you know what we tell founders, right? We tell them, make sure our thesis is aligned, make sure the stage is the right stage, the check size is around the right stage, check size. And it's the same thing with LPs. And so I really like Jess's approach and using Airtable. I just use a Google sheet. But it's essentially, and because my background professionally has been sales, I love this sort of thing where you make a target list and you're looking at the thesis, you're looking at the alignment, and you're asking yourself, is this a good fit for us? Is it a good fit for us now or later? And for me, I'm always thinking short term, medium term, and long term. So building relationships the whole time, but being really thoughtful and strategic, because you can waste a lot of time. And then in terms of like when you do start talking to LPs and they express some interest, really drilling down on whether it's real or whether it's just talk, because the timeline may be off, the capital may not be there, or they may be what's happening in the market right now is there are a lot of institutional investors that are re-upping on their on the funds that they're already in. So qualifying again, you have to ask, because maybe you can't get money, but it's a good, then you can start plotting all of these targets that you have on your list in stages and bucketing them, so that you know where to spend your time and energy, because as we all know it, building relationships and all of this takes a lot of time. So prioritizing, putting almost like sales stages for your fundraise is really important. And just like with traditional sales, you're going to get a lot of no's, but we make our business based on the yeses. So that's just part of it. Don't take it personal. Some people they will just not invest in you just because they don't like you. That happens. So, and there's a lot of bias that a lot of us face. And that's something to also be really candid about with yourself. So don't beat yourself up if you get no's. It's just part of the process. And the other thing I would say is the more you put yourself out there, the more you build in public, the more people will come to you with, hey, I'm interested in exploring, and hey, I would like to. And if you're not raising, it's the best time. So right now I'm not fundraising, but I am planning on fundraising for Fund 2. And people are coming to me and I'm like, well, there's these other emerging fund managers I think you should look at. And literally this week I was so happy I made a warm introduction. But at the same time, I'm saying, hey, so what is your check range? And when are you looking to invest? And give me a little bit more information. What are you expecting from the funds that you invest in? So I'm collecting data so that I can then be really thoughtful about how I pitch them, how I sell to them being part of the fund. So just some things to keep in mind.
And so I just wanted to point on the fact that Clayton did ask us 2 questions, and we all answered the first one. But just to go back to the second question, and I understand we're short on time, but the way I'm thinking about Fund 2 and Fund 3, my goal up front was to create a large multi-stage firm, right? So Fund 1, 10 million, Fund 2, somewhere between 30 to 50, Fund 3, 80 million plus, right? Very similar to if you look at 645, I think they went like 8 million, 40 million, 160 plus, right? Like that's the model, but also understanding as a fund manager, the size of your fund tends to dictate your strategy, right? So as your fund gets larger, you have to write larger checks, which means you're going to invest in later stage companies, right? So if you're a pre-seed to seed investor, that's all you ever want to do. You may never want to raise a fund larger than 50 million, but that also impacts the money that you make as a fund manager, right? So understand, like, your fees and your carry are really tied to the size of your fund as well. So most fund managers automatically default to, I want to get a larger fund, right? But if you're going to do that, be prepared for your strategy changing over time. Or you can do like some funds, like if you think like a Greenspring, or even 500 Startups, where it's a family of funds, where you can have multiple funds underneath of one management company of different profiles with different GPs, but all the GPs can still participate in the carry and the fees overall as a whole from the management company. So there's different ways to structure it, but just understand, like, everybody just defaults to, I want a larger fund, but know what that means for you.
Totally. I feel like we can spend an hour just like jamming on portfolio construction, because we're raising a $50 million fund. We've done our first close. But we love pre-seed. It's where we've worked for the last 10 years. And the 50 million is very intentional based on how many shots on goal we want to have, what we want our ownership percentage to be. And the amount of capital we feel is appropriate when we're investing across the country. I'm not shoving $3 million in a pre-seed company if it's an Austin-based company. Like, that just doesn't make sense. And so, our strategy is we plan to just raise a series of $50 million funds, maybe 50 to 75, never more than that. So when we have institutions that are like, come back to us when you're raising 200 million, I'm like, we're never going to be raising 200 million because this is a strategy drift. And frankly, I don't have demonstration of success managing that much capital or getting into those deals. And that's just not what I want to do. It's not who we are as investors. So 1,000%, I think that like if there are any emerging managers out there listening, like be thoughtful about your portfolio construction, about why you're raising the amount you want to raise. If it is something where, it's a proof of concept fund and then you want to do this step up, totally makes sense. But otherwise, like if you're going from a $30 to $100 million fund and it's a different profile of LPs, and they're going to want to see what demonstration do you have of executing on that strategy. Particularly if you've had success with a $20 million fund, it doesn't mean that that's going to translate into success in a strategy at a $100 million fund. So it's just like things to be mindful of too that we think about a lot.
And one thing that I'd like to just share is, as you're thinking about your fund size, to Jess's point, if you grow your fund to a certain amount, over 50, 100, beyond that, you're going to be less collaborative because you're literally elbowing out other funds. And so if you as a human being want to always be collaborative, keep in mind that bigger funds mean less of that because you're going to want to lead, you're going to want to have that, and there's going to be a lot of funds that you need to kick out.
One quick, we only have 3 minutes left. I want to get to an audience question real quick. So lightning round. The question is, what's your advice for folks becoming VC scouts in order to build a track record to break into VC? So I'm not sure how many of the panelists did scout work or maybe formed a syndicate, but, because I think that's kind of similar. But advice that you have around how do you leverage that portfolio as a scout to go on and do bigger things to reach the stage that you're at now?
You want to make sure that I would say, you want to make sure you're with a scout program that allows you to select companies. Some scout programs, they just give you the ability to send companies forward. And if that's the case, then I would tell you try to meet a bunch of companies and send them in large batches so that you can play the numbers game, right? Like if there's like 12 companies that you've met in the last quarter that you like, send all 12, because if you're a scout where you're just sending companies, well, you need to show that you can source companies that firm actually invests in, right? If you're doing something like a Lightspeed scout, which I'm a scout for Lightspeed, they give you 200, and so is Lolita. They give you 250, and so is Clayton, right? Your Lightspeed scout, Clayton? No, sorry. But they give you $250,000 to make $25,000 checks over a period of 2 years. So that's you sourcing deals and actually investing in the founders and investing in companies. And you can point to that as actual track record. Like, I sourced these companies. I put them forth. They went through an investment committee and they got funded, and then I helped them grow. So being able to grow your track record like that becomes really important. So you just want to make sure you understand the dynamics of that scout program, because every scout program is different, right? Yep. It's very different being a scout for Lightspeed versus a scout or a venture partner on Republic, or, even back when NDVC was doing their scout program, being a scout at Indy, right? Like, you just want to make sure that it's a program where you get attribution the deals you put forward.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, go ahead, Lily.
I was just going to close up with, remember the 3 things that we're supposed to be really great at as VCs: sourcing, selecting, and stewardship. So in any program, whether it's VC or a scout program or an SPV or something else, just remember that what we want to show is that we're good at these 3. And the best traction metric is going to be markups in a short period of time.
Yep. And I would just add one quick thing onto that too, is if we get asked a lot, like, especially because I have a non-traditional background, like, how'd you talk your way into being a VC? And it happens all the time. But so I also think about it through, like, there's 3 things that you can really do that are actionable, maybe 4 things you can really do. And it's number 1, what's your demonstration to unique deal flow? So what networks, what relationships you have? Maybe you went to college, maybe you're a spin out of a mafia, whatever. So that's number 1. Like, how do you articulate your unique access to deal flow? Number 2 is, what unique view do you have on the world? What unique view do you have on a market? What unique view do you have on a market map? And talk about it, blog about it, tweet about it, whatever it might be. And then number 3 is what unique skill sets do you have to create value for those companies? Maybe you can help with commercialization. Maybe you can help find product market fit, whatever it is, like what is your